Hello and welcome back to Old Soul Podcast. My name is Bree, that's spelled B-R-E-I. Thank you so much. This is going to be my last podcast episode for the year of 2021. I apologize for the long and overdue wait for this episode, but I have had some things going on, so there's that. Today I'm going to be discussing the film Dirty Dancing, directed by Emile. I think his last name is pronounced Ardolino. I apologize if I said that incorrectly. This is a film that was released in the year 1987. It was rated PG-13. The runtime is an hour and 40 minutes. Dirty Dancing is a classic film. Even those that haven't seen it or have only seen it once probably know what this film is. Today I wanted just to talk about sort of a summary of what happens in the film, but I also wanted to, again, point out some scenes, some shots that stand out to me like I always do, and I wanted to discuss some details about the behind-the-scenes process of this film. A lot of reasons why I want to talk about that is because there's a documentary on Netflix that really stood out to me. I'm a person that likes to sit down and watch films. The genre does draw me in. I'm not going to say that I'm not someone that seeks out certain types of films, but I usually do try to give films a chance, even if I don't know if I'll like it or not, just to see if, if I don't like the story, maybe I'll like the cinematography. If I don't like the cinematography, maybe I'll like, this specific actor. There's a lot of different reasons. But what I really, really love about film, even if I don't have a strong interest or love for a specific film, I really enjoy the process of making films. Whether that's casting or directing or the soundtrack, cinematography, lighting, those are all really interesting details. And there's this series on Netflix. I don't know if it's anywhere else. I've only seen it on Netflix, where it's called The Movies. Hold on. Let me look at my notes. Okay, it's called The Movies That Made Us. And I think there's probably like a few seasons that I've seen on there. There's like a section where they talk about horror films and like scary movies and how that came about. Just a bunch of different genres. So it's not just this one documentary about Dirty Dancing. There's a lot of other things that you could be interested in. But I specifically went to the Movies That Made Us series and saw Dirty Dancing listed, and it's pretty much a documentary. IMDb quotes it as summary as stepping on toes and tangling with rejection. The women behind this girls movie touched millions despite co-star tension and a meager budget. So I think I'm just going to go back and forth between what happens in the film, the premise of the film, so on and so forth, try to keep that steady, and then I'll jump out with details about the film. But I do think I'm going to start with the documentary first, just because this was a big thing and this movie almost wasn't made, basically. So this film was almost not made for several reasons. And again, you should go and watch the documentary. You'll probably get more details and aspects about the film that I either forgot or just didn't remember, don't want to talk about. But first and foremost, Eleanor, I believe that's her name, she's the writer of this film. I don't want to say that this is a biographical film, because with any film, even if it is biographical, it still materializes in some form in fiction. But she did state that, she used to go to, I don't know if they would call it a country club, but like a vacation spot where other people went during the summer, and she used to be called Baby, and there's just aspects about her real life that obviously intertwine into this film, and she is the writer, and I think a lot of writers have a lot of pieces of themselves that are in their stories. That's just something that to note, and I thought that was interesting. But Eleanor, sorry, my notes are a little scattered. Eleanor and another producer that worked with her built some form of a friendship. I don't really remember how it started, or if it was really a friendship, or if it was just like a business thing. But either way, they kind of came together at some point with this story that Eleanor had been working on for, it seems like, quite a while. The specific producer, who's also a woman, worked for like this company, and so she knew some people, or had worked for a, you know, big budget production company at some point, and so she had some, you know, connections, she knew people. But a lot of the reason why this film didn't get made, almost didn't get made, and had a lot of pushback, is because even in that quote that IMDb states, you know, girls film, they felt like there wasn't an audience for this film, because it was about a girl going to like this vacation spot over the summer, set in the 1960s, but it was going to be released in like the 80s. They just didn't think that anyone was going to want to see this film. I don't know why. I think it's sexist, but whatever. That's not new. And then there was when they finally did get it to, you know, get someone to help them actually, you know, produce the film, get them a budget, get them a contract. This company wasn't really well known for good films. Like, they had films, but they were like not hitting the top of the charts, and probably weren't going to go anywhere. And actually, this company that they ended up like producing with, and when this made a big hit, this company's not even a thing anymore. So that's a whole journey. You should definitely watch this documentary for those details. But anyway, it wasn't like they got like this big deal with this big company that was going to help them produce this film and like all that. It was really difficult, and they had to fight to get a director. I wouldn't say fight. They seemed, and when I say they, I'm still referring to the producer and Eleanor, the writer. They had an idea of who they wanted as the director, and obviously they chose Emile at the end of the day. They felt like he was a perfect fit, like he would understand the concepts of dance. I think he had like a background with dance, and had done either it was a documentary series or a film series in which he worked with dancers. And dancing was a huge part of this film, hence the title, which I don't even know if, I don't even think that was going to be the title, which isn't new. Titles change all the time. And then you have the whole thing with the sexism of it being a girls' film, and them not thinking that there was going to be a target market audience for this film. Then they had to fight for the budget, and of course with dancing, the most important thing with dancing, besides I guess technique and having an audience, is music. And music is expensive to have in a film for copyright reasons. I'm sure even in the 80s it was a pain in the ass. And if you watch the documentary, it seems that was the case. So they had originally had a composer of some sorts, and that didn't work out because he just wasn't delivering with the music. And so they had to go in like halfway through filming and get a new sort of composer, soundtrack person to come in and fill that gap. They were practicing for this film in terms of dancing without music for a very long time. I think they were just using sort of like a what do you call it? Something just to keep the pacing and the counts, not necessarily saying the counts, probably something just like monotone for rhythm reasons. Casting was better. I think originally they were going to have some larger stars at the time, or at least some stars or familiar faces that were growing at the time, but Eleanor was very specific about music. She was very specific about the story. She was specific about what she wanted, and there were just things that she was not going to let get out of the script for the final product. And as a writer, I think that's pretty understandable, and I do think a lot of the times when you put your heart into something and then these studios just want to rip it apart, I can understand that sentiment. So I ended up picking Jennifer Grey, I believe that's her last name. I'm pretty sure you know who Jennifer Grey is. If not, other films that she was in that I've seen are Ferris Bueller's Day Off, of course Dirty Dancing, this film, and I think she was in Red Dawn, which is going to come back up in this discussion as well. And then eventually they casted Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze's been in several films. Some of the more popular ones I would say is Dirty Dancing, obviously, Ghost. He was also in Red Dawn. He was also in another commentary I did way back when called The Outsiders. And so these were their two main leads. And these were obviously they were the main characters, so they were going to be a big part of the film. And the other casting went on about however they needed it. They did struggle for a while before they finally decided on Jennifer. And they felt like she was a good fit in that she was young. She really embodied baby. She still had that awkwardness. Not that overly done Hollywood shit, I'm sure. She was a good fit, ultimately. And then you have Patrick, who I think she said it was his eyes or his smile, something about something with the eyes, I think, that really drew her in. And when I say she, I'm talking about Eleanor, the writer. But I don't think it was as easy to get him a part of the cast because him and Jennifer had some sort of falling out during their filming of Red Dawn, which was a film that they had done together in the past. And there's this whole thing where she didn't really want to do the film if Patrick was going to be a part of it. And at some point, they were really pushing to have Patrick. But of course, if there's going to be tension on set, that's not going to work. So I think Patrick and Jennifer had like a heart-to-heart in the other room and they settled on whatever. I'm interested to know what happened on the set of Red Dawn that made them so tense around each other to the point where Jennifer was like not going to do the film if Patrick was going to be in it. Either way, it got solved and their chemistry on set was great. But it didn't really tell us, and I guess if they didn't want anyone to know, that makes sense, but I think it's something that should be noted. And Patrick actually had a huge background in dance. His mom was like a well-known ballet professional teacher or something like that. But I think a lot of the reason why he didn't have dancing sort of in his portfolio or resume is because he had an injury that was affecting that. I think it was like a knee injury, which actually started to affect him on set as well. Something similar to that, some injury. And that's why he wasn't really sold on doing the role, but eventually, you know, something happened and that happened. I'm sure there's more detail in the documentary, but I can't remember the details of that. It's been a little while since I've seen it. And so, yeah, so eventually they are able to get somewhat of a budget, even though it was a really small budget. They were able to figure out where they were going to shoot the film. They were able to figure out who they were going to cast in the film, and they felt like that was a good fit. They had their director. Again, like I said, during the set there were issues, but they tried to save as much as they could with the budget. They tried to make room for their songs. Some of the most iconic songs, or maybe not iconic, but just some songs that stood out that I remembered, is the song Love Man, Hungry Eyes. These should sound familiar. If not, just watch the film and you'll know immediately. And then there's this song, She's Like the Wind. I think that Patrick actually helped write and sing. I don't know if he sang it, but I know he had some hand in that. So I thought that was really cool, how the roles in which the writer, the producer, the actors were all really giving everything for this film, especially since it was so difficult to get, you know, released and in theaters and so on and so forth. What else? I'll list the artist of those songs that I just stated in the bio, just so you know who the artists of those songs are. So yeah, so this film starts with a young baby. Pretty sure she's a teenager at the time. She's about to go to college, and her and her family go to like this, it's called Catskill Mountains in upstate New York. It's like a resort, vacation resort, and this is again set in the 60s. Specifically in IMDb it says 1963. Baby's real name is actually Frances, but she's the younger of two siblings. It's her older sister and her, and everyone just calls her Baby, and I'm pretty sure it's probably because she's like the baby of the group, whatever. And then there's her dad, Dr. Hausman, and her mother. So there's that. Her older sister Lisa, so on and so forth. So from the beginning of the movie, they're just all in the car driving to the resort. It kind of gives us a backstory on what's going on historically at the time. And as soon as they get there, in the beginning of the film, I kind of just remember it as it's setting up the plot line, and I remember it specifically because social class sort of merges in pretty quickly. There's a lot of people that work at the resort that are like these, it seems like they're like children of like rich kids, or like kids that are going to Yale and working there over the summer, probably there to network and make some extra cash, because a lot of people that are actually attending and staying at the resort are like rich white families, or some sort of rich people. And the guy that's like the owner, or at least is in charge, like the director of the resort, he's an asshole. He puts on like this performance most of the film where he pretends to like be charming, I suppose, and he, like, as soon as, the customer or the members or the people aren't there, he's pretty shitty to his staff. You can tell pretty quickly that they're not really changing with the times, in the sense that they have sheet music that's pretty outdated for the time. It seems like the kids that are there with their parents, or young adults that are there with their parents for the summer, aren't really enjoying themselves. The activities that they have are pretty outdated. It seems like the older group that attended the resort are having somewhat of a good time. There's like dance classes you can take, which is how we're introduced to Johnny and how we're introduced to Penny. Johnny is the character that Patrick Swayze is playing, and Penny is his childhood best friend, who is also a dancer. They're both teaching dance, and they're there to entertain the guest. And again, Baby is the main character, and it's her story, but those two, Johnny and Penny, do come into play, obviously, in the film. And so there's that briefing. Right off the bat, you get this bad error about this guy. What's his name? Robbie. I'm pretty sure his name is Robbie. He's like flirting with Lisa. He seems like a prick, like a fuckboy, like he thinks he knows everything. He's just there to have a good time. He doesn't really care. I mean, there's even a whole scene where that director guy I was talking about, like the head boss, has a whole spiel with the staff, like, you're here to show them a good time, blah 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 blah, but this and that, don't be too nice, or this and that, don't sleep with the staff. I don't know, there's this weird crappy sexist thing going on, and like classism going on there, that I got the vibe of in the first half of the film. Right away you see Baby's curiosity through dance, and I think just through young adulthood wanting to grow and change, and a lot of that just happens because of experience and exposure. She's very much a daddy's girl, and they talk about changing the world and this and that. They're very close, her and her father. And I think the first night where she sees Penny and Johnny dancing, she's really kind of curious and lost in it because their dancing is incredible. Patrick Swayze really holds his own in this film when it comes to dancing, and so does the character Penny. She does a great job at dancing in this film, and I don't know if she gets a lot of credit for that, but she should, because she does amazing. And it should be noted that Jennifer Grey didn't have a huge background in dance at the time, so she was most likely learning a lot of things about dance on set from Patrick, who had a lot of experience because of his mother's background, and she taught him a lot of things, I'm sure. So there was that whole thing. And so as we're thrusted into this, it really just starts with her curiosity with dance, and seeing them at these activities. Obviously she has a crush on Johnny, but she, I think at first, just thinks that Johnny's with Penny. Okay, so if we jump past all of that, I think what really kickstarts the film is the scene where, what's his name? Johnny's cousin, who also works there, I think his name might be Billy. Okay, I think his name's Billy. Anyway, he works there, he like helps with the baggage. He's probably like a runner or something like that. Just goes and assists people when they need him. Billy is Johnny's cousin who also works at the resort, and he is carrying in these watermelons into like this, it looks like a secluded, staff only sort of isolated storage barn unit. I don't even know how to describe it. It's just obviously it's for the employees. They're not on the clock, so on and so forth. So she hears the music. She's curious. Again, curiosity is really what throws us into the plot here. And her and Billy are walking in to this little unit with watermelons. And then that's the quote of, "I carried a watermelon," you know, that comes up later. Anyway, at first he was hesitant to like show her what was going on, but then he was like, okay, whatever. And probably because she's offered to help him. Okay. So they go in, and immediately you're hit with the music. The dancing that they're doing would, I guess, be considered secular at the time. Dirty dancing, there's grinding, it's like soulful R&B, it's breaking the rules, I suppose. And I think at first baby's shocked, but you quickly find out that she's kind of like, oh, this is kind of cool, you know. So they go in, and the dancing's incredible. There's a lot of chemistry between these like partnered couples. The camera's closing in on everyone. It's very much a vibe. And eventually Johnny and Penny come in, start dancing, and she's really taken in by that. I think her and Billy have this discussion about, you know, aren't they dating? You know, baby's curious because I think she has a crush on him, obviously, and also she just thinks they're dating. They have so much chemistry when they're dancing. And Billy just tells him, like, oh, not since they were kids, so they probably dated in the past, not anymore. And I think Johnny notices baby, and he goes over, he's like, what's she doing here? You know, she's not supposed to be here, what the hell? And that becomes a little bickering argument, and then he starts dancing with baby anyway, and they just settle on her staying there for a little bit, and he's kind of teaching her some pointers, and she really gets into it to the point where he's walked off after a while. He's kind of like tired of dancing with her, and she's still like really into it, and she just looks really cute and awkward, and it just kind of is the start of her going from baby to Frances, going from young adult to woman, you know, going from what her parents want her to be to who she's becoming. And I think that's something that Jennifer Grey brought to this character that I think Eleanor saw pretty, you know, soon when they were casting her. So at that point, I'm trying to think of what goes on that I want to talk about. Okay, so we get to a point where she's curious, she's kind of really noticing Johnny, tries to be around them, just interested. The days are kind of ticking by. Lisa's gonna be in this production that they do at the end of every resort vacation holiday. Like at the very end, they'd have like this big showcase, I guess, and some people can sign up and just show their talents and whatever. It seems like a big talent show that they do at the end, and they do a big dance every year, and it's usually just the same old thing every time, sort of outdated at this point for this time frame in terms of music and style, but it seems like the staff just does what they're told so they can get paid, which makes sense. So that's going on, this whole thing between baby's sister, older sister Lisa, and Robbie, the douchebag. Robbie is really a douchebag. And then baby and Lisa, they don't seem to get along very well, which isn't unusual for siblings. It seems like Lisa's a little resentful toward baby because she's like daddy's girl, and Lisa doesn't really probably get along with him in that way as well. And so there's a little bit of tension there, and that you see that throughout the film. At some point, baby is with this guy, I don't even remember his name. I think it's like the head director of the resort's nephew or his son. I can't even remember because I don't like his character at all, and I don't even care to go back and check on that, but he's some guy who's like trying to woo baby. He always talks about himself, about what school he went to or is going to, who he knows, how much money he has. He talks to her like she's a child, like he has to teach her, like he's so irritating. I don't like any scene that he's in, and every time he's on screen, I want him off screen. Which just shows that he played his character very well, because he is annoying. And anyway, Baby's with him. I guess you could call it a date. Baby really doesn't want to be with him. Her dad kind of like pushes her to do that, which is annoying. Again, her father sort of personifying what he wants for her versus what she wants to do. And she just kind of goes with it because it makes her dad happy, and Baby's nice. So they're on this like kind of a date, but Baby's ready to go home. There's a scene where they're at this like magic show. Baby's really irritated with it and frustrated, and they end up going to get food, and Baby sees Penny in the corner, and Penny's the dancer of the like co-dancer with Johnny, and she's in the corner and she's crying, and Baby steers that guy that she's going on a date with away before he can see her. She doesn't want Penny to get in trouble, and she probably is worried about Penny, so she gets him away and then goes and finds Billy, the cousin of Johnny. And then Billy gets Johnny, and they are walking to go get Penny. You know, Johnny's sort of like, why'd you bring her? He's like, well, she knows where she is, and like, just in case someone shows up, you know, she can kind of distract them. So they go to the cafeteria where they were before, where Baby was before, and Penny's there, and they grab Penny. And there's this whole thing about Penny being pregnant, and the father of the baby is Robbie, the fucking douchebag who's trying to hook up with her older sister, Baby's older sister, Lisa. And I know there's an assumption right away that it's Johnny's baby, but it's not, which makes him really frustrated. Understandably, because people think so little of him for no reason, and he's just used to being treated like trash. And Penny really liked Robbie, but of course he just told her a bunch of lies and then got her pregnant, and then didn't want to take any responsibility, which is why she was crying, because she was just trying to let him know. And then they don't really want to tell Baby this, but she's just kind of already there, and they're fighting about that. But she finds out that Penny wants to get an abortion, and they don't have enough money, and Baby seems to think that Robbie's better than he actually is at the time, which she doesn't really know how foul of a person he is at the time. So she's just thinking, oh, if it's Robbie, then I know he has the money and I know he can help. And Penny's just like, he knows, Baby. You know, she's like, go back to your playpen, Baby. And Baby's really sad about it, and she obviously feels uncomfortable being in that situation, but she knows all the tea at this point. And I do want to bring up the fact that the abortion scene was something that affected the rating of this film, which was another thing that almost probably could have made this film not become a thing. Eleanor, the writer, was really specific about wanting to have the abortion scene a part of the film, which I'm really grateful that she did, because I feel like abortion is not discussed enough. And from the viewpoint of a female writer, from a female perspective, and these things are really happening and are going to continue to happen, and I feel like having that on screen is really important. And it did it in a way that was honest when you talk about social class, resources, access, healthcare, things like that. But this almost affected the rating, which can limit how many people will see or can see the film, and obviously they want as many people as possible to see the film. There's certain levels to that, but I'm sure there are even other reasons why. But it got to stay in the film, and they cut out some other scenes, probably essentially like other maybe sex scenes, I'm not sure. There's like a few in this film, but they're not really like graphic or anything. They're more like romantic, lighthearted, and I think they were able to finagle the rating, but I am really glad that they kept that in the film. So Baby runs to Robbie at some point and tells him, and he's being a douche, saying like, I don't care, she's just, you know, a whore, pretty much is what he's saying. And Baby's just like, stay away from my sister. And I think she pours water on him or something. She's just disgusted. And this really starts the plot, because Baby ends up taking Penny's place as Johnny's dance partner because she has to go to this clinic to get the abortion on the same day that they're booked for, you know, some dance show that they're doing, just some gig that they're doing as a dance, and they need the money. But Penny can't make it, so Baby jumps in, and this is how her relationship really starts with Johnny. At first, they weren't really open to it, and they didn't really understand why Baby was helping. And I think she even went to her dad and got money to give to Penny at some point. And they teased her about, oh, you went to daddy, blah, blah, blah. But they really needed the money, so on and so forth. I'm getting a little fuzzy on whether they took the money. I think they did take the money. I think it was just a protest at first. And I think Penny started to see like how kind Baby was. She wasn't just being nosy or rude, and how much she was starting to help them out. And it really does start to build a trusting friendship there, even if it is only short-lived, but it still seems to be growing. But this really jumpstarts the plot into the dancing aspects. So her and Johnny go through this whole thing. There's even a montage of them practicing on this long sort of log that's over a little bit of a dip that definitely could hurt you. I think on the behind the scenes documentary they stated that I think Johnny's character, I think Patrick actually fell, and Jennifer was kind of afraid to shoot that scene. She might have had a double at that time. They shot in the water where they were practicing the lift, and it was supposedly like super cold at the time when they were shooting that. I'm trying to think of other things that I could remember from the documentary, but just in terms of that, there's a whole montage of him teaching her. There's a quote here too when you have sort of that montage moment. Let me find it. Where Johnny's sort of lecturing Baby. So he says, "Look, spaghetti arms, this is my dance space. This is your dance space. I don't go into yours. You don't go into mine. You gotta hold the frame." So again, he really has to teach her from, you know, an 8 count. From I'm leading, you follow, stay in your frame. Like he's literally teaching Baby the basics and growing from there. Like she's having to start from 0 for this gig that they're doing. And they go through this montage of learning, and she's slowly but surely getting it. She's frustrated. There's a time where, you know, they have all this tension on screen. Some of that could be because of behind the scenes stuff. But also the characters are really frustrated with each other. Johnny's starting to open up more to her eventually. He sees how hard she works. He sees how kind and open-minded she is. She's not like the others, like he thought in the beginning. Baby doubts herself, but also is really coming into this new part of her, falling for Johnny, learning how to dance so quickly, realizing she really enjoys it, all those things. And it's sort of like she's living somewhat of a double life because she's lying to her dad more, which she never did before. No one ever knows where she is. Okay. So eventually they finally go to the gig. They do the dance. I think she messes up a little bit. She looks very nervous and awkward, but she does all the steps that she can remember and recall. Anything that she messes up on, Johnny sort of just kind of guides her through it. There's a scene in the locker room that Penny and her have a heart-to-heart, and Penny thanks her, and they're helping with the makeup. That's really cute before that scene where they're dancing. I think there might have been a lift or a jump in the dance that they were doing, and she like misses it. So that really hones in on that lift that they end up doing in the end, which is like the most well-known thing about Dirty Dancing, is that huge lift that she does in the end, and she nails it. And especially when at some point like midway through the film where her and Johnny do that gig where she doesn't jump at the right time or whatever they were supposed to do, there's this little thing that happens after they get back from the gig, where Johnny beforehand was like sleeping with some of the guests because they would like pay him essentially. They call it extra dance lessons, but really they were just paying him and they would like sleep with him. And it really talks about sort of the perspective of men, maybe good-looking men who are poor, who do things for money. And I think it's interesting that they sort of go into that and delve into that sort of real adult issue, because it happens a lot where like they'll call women whores and women will have sex for money. That's like a whole business. Okay. Yeah. But it's kind of reversed in that that's happening with Johnny on the resort, and he's like really poor. He doesn't want to be a carpenter. I think that's what his family does. They want him to go back and do that, but he doesn't want to do that. And dance is like the only thing he knows and the only thing he's like really good at, so it's how he makes his money. So social class is a huge thing in this film. I just think it should be noted. And anyway, he's starting to like reject those women that he was like sleeping with, and there's like one specific woman that gets really upset about it, and so she tries to get him fired essentially. And the main reason why he even rejects her is because he's kind of committing to Baby. I think they sleep together. No, they definitely do sleep together at some point after the gig. Penny gives Johnny sort of like a stern talking to, kind of like, you don't sleep with them, you don't do this, you don't do this. And coming from Penny, it's kind of hypocritical because of her whole thing with Robbie, but I guess considering Robbie was like another employee, whereas Baby's like a guest, I guess I get it. I'm not trying to say she's like not a good person or whatever, but it's like, come on. There's a point before that where she got like a botched abortion, so they thought it was like legit and everything. It went wrong. Baby went to tell her dad, and she, needed his help. When she asked for the money before to help them out, she didn't tell him what it was about. And then now she's going back to ask him for help again. He goes in there, he helps Penny, saves her life essentially, and she's better. But yeah, she ended up getting a botched abortion, and that's another thing that they show in the film that I think is really good and pretty progressive for the time, and I really enjoy that they had that on there. In a lot of ways it could be traumatic and stressful to watch, but I think it was necessary, and I'm glad that they kept it in. And so the gig happened, that happened. Now Johnny and Baby are committed, but Baby is having issues with her dad because, for one, he doesn't like Johnny, he doesn't trust Johnny. I think that's a social class issue, but also he assumed that the baby was Johnny's, but it wasn't. And he assumed, you weren't even a real man, you didn't take responsibility for Penny. It's just a mess. And he's mad at Baby because he finds out, obviously, that the money she used was for that, and he's so angry and disappointed, and Baby feels sort of ashamed of herself. Then we get to the point with all that tension where that lady that Johnny was sleeping with at some point tries to get him fired, stating that, someone stole something from her, and she like tries to pin it on Johnny, something to that degree. They find out later that the people that were actually stealing from the resort was like this old couple that they kept running into, and they had like a bunch of people's, wallets, so on and so forth. And Baby was sort of Johnny's witness, and she stated like, I know that he didn't do it because he was with me at the time that you said that this happened, which would have been at night, which would have not have been good for a young girl her age, I guess, at that time, if you're talking about image. And so that pissed her dad off even more, and they fired him anyway because he was with her. And that really pissed Baby off because, she's starting to see that the world is a lot more fucked up than she thought it was. And she's like, they fired you anyway because of me. You're right, Johnny, nothing ever works out, so on and so forth. Sort of like things that are kind of true, but also like not Baby at all. She's usually really hopeful and wishful. And Johnny's like, I don't want to hear that from you. You can, like he has actually gotten a lot more hopeful because of Baby, and he's really grateful that she did that for him. And he's like, no one ever would have done that for me in the past. I really appreciate it, And that happens. There's this whole thing where Lisa finds out that Robbie's been sleeping with other people. They were kind of talking. I'm glad that never happened. I'm glad nothing ever went further because he's a douche bag. And Robbie says some really shitty things to Baby. Him and Johnny get in a little bit of a tussle that's cool to watch. Johnny gets a little upset because Baby doesn't tell her dad about him. And she's sort of like embarrassed. I don't know that she's so much embarrassed about it. I think her and her dad are just having a lot of tension and she doesn't want to make it any worse than it already is. But it's still sad because, when you're with someone, they want to be proudly out about the fact that they're with you. And they feel like if you're hiding, it's sort of like a stab to them, I guess. That's the situation. Or that's how it seems. And so once we're past all of that, we're finally to the last scene. There's still tension between Baby and her dad. Penny's better now, though, thanks to Dr. Hausman. Lisa's performing in this little final end of the year talent showcase. She's not with Robbie. Baby has discovered more of who she is, so on and so forth. I will say before this last scene, there is a scene that's really emotional, and even the documentary talks about it, in which Baby and her father, Dr. Hausman, have this talk near the water outside, and I really think it's super sad too because she starts crying because she loves her father, and you can see that in both of their eyes that they really, really love each other so much, and they have a really strong bond. But what Baby needs her father to understand is that she's not Baby. She's Frances. She wants to change the world just like her and her dad have talked about before. She wants to add something to it that's good. But he wants her to be a lawyer, someone's wife, someone's upstanding wife. She wants to do things. She wants to grow. She wants to learn. She doesn't want to be in a bubble, in a box with certain people. And she just needs him to understand that. And she even says, I know I disappointed you. I disappointed myself as well. Because she did lie, and things like that. Even if she had good intentions. But you disappointed me too. That's what she tells her dad. It's really sad, but also super needed. And I think it's something that happens in life in general where you really have to try to get your point across to your parents and they just won't listen. They have this idea, this whole life for what you should be or what they want you to be versus who you are. And that clashes with you growing up. That's more than, teenage angst. That's more than having a bad day. I think it's a point that every young adult or person has experienced, whether to this extent or will experience at some point with their parents. And she walks off and her dad doesn't say anything through the whole thing. You just see his, sort of facial emotional reaction with no words. He just listens to her, which is really sweet. So jump back to the last scene, the iconic scene. Baby's in this table that's kind of in the corner, but not really in the corner, which is talked about in the documentary. This iconic quote, "Nobody puts Baby in a corner." It should be noted that Patrick Swayze thought that that was a very cringy, terrible line, as well as half of the other staff and half of the other crew on set for the film, but it actually became super well known and everyone even to this day knows that line. So they were wrong about that line, and good thing they kept that in the line. Eleanor even states, Eleanor the writer, Baby wasn't even really in a corner. She's kind of just by a wall, but it worked out. So whatever, something to note, just so you know. Anyway, Johnny comes in, nobody puts Baby in a corner, and the dad looks like he's gonna get mad, but then they go off. He kind of breaks in to this little function because he did get fired and he had left for some time, but then he came back. Okay, whatever. So they go up, sort of crashing the party, cutting off the people that are currently singing on stage, whatever the hell they're singing. I don't even remember. It sounds like a Christmas carol, honestly. But they cut it off and they start playing music. and Johnny and Baby start dancing, and Baby looks so happy, and her mom and dad are sitting there watching in sort of like awe, and I think Lisa's just kind of clapping and watching along. You know, the audience gets into it, the other staff members start really doing, you know, their dirty dancing that they usually would do when they're off the clock. It's clearly choreographed, but it doesn't matter. It's supposed to be spur of the moment. And at some point, he like does the major lift with Baby, and there's like these soft pink colors from the lights, and she's wearing this pink dress, and she lands the iconic lift. I know for a fact there's a scene within this, there's a shot within the scene where he like Johnny jumps off the stage before the lift when he's about to go catch her, and he does like this little roll trick, I don't know, something that uses a lot of his knees, and I know that in the documentary they stated how he had a really hard time shooting that, and he did that several times in pain. And then finally there was just a time where he was like, okay, I got one more of these jumps in me, we have to get this shot, and they got it. But it should be noted that his injury was taking a toll on him during the filming of this, and it didn't show, and he did an excellent job. And that should just be noted. He did a great job with that. And so they do the lift, the iconic lift, with all this amazing music throughout the film, especially this final scene. All the choreography is great. The crowd is really loving it. Then off to the corner, you know, the father apologizes to Johnny because at that same time, maybe a few minutes before, he talks to Robbie and finds out that Robbie was the one that got Penny pregnant and didn't take responsibility. And he apologizes to Johnny, and he says, you know, when I'm wrong, I say I'm wrong, which is all you really can do, right? And then he sort of makes up with Baby. He's like, you looked great out there. And they have this heart-to-heart. And, you know, the movie ends. But Dirty Dancing is a classic film that I love to watch. I think it's good for all age groups. It doesn't get too bad. I really hate that they labeled it as a girls' movie. I think, because they labeled it as that to be sort of derogatory and hateful, and I love the fact that it's a girls' movie. It's for women, by women. I love the coming of age aspects because I just love that always. It has amazing music, amazing dancing. I think the cast is incredible, and it's something that will stand the test of time for sure. It already has. So if you have time, you should definitely go watch Dirty Dancing, and hopefully you find a scene that you love and a character that you love or hate, and you enjoy the ride. Thank you, and have a good day. Bye.
I'm sorry I let you down. I'm so sorry, Daddy. But you let me down too.